Welcome to my introduction of NestJS. I'm going to jump straight to it and explain exactly what NestJS is. NestJS is basically a Node.js framework. It comes with TypeScript out of the box, TSLint out of the box, ESLint out of the box. It gives you guards, interceptors, pipes, and it's extremely modular and extremely beautiful to write. There's also helper functions in NestJS that help speed up development. For example, NestJS has a GraphQL module that helps speed up development and speed up standing up a GraphQL server. Now, what GraphQL is, it's a query language for APIs. It provides clients with exactly the data that clients ask for. So instead of a REST API that gives you a set of data, for example, if you ask for persons, it gives you all the person's data, and you don't get to pick and choose what data you want. GraphQL, on the other hand, allows you to pick and choose exactly the properties of that person that you want. Of course, it's easier to see this when you start coding up a GraphQL server. So let's get into some code. Let's get started with NestJS and GraphQL. However, before you do that, I'm going to ask you to go ahead and support me. Please follow me on Twitter. Please follow me on dev.to. Subscribe to my channel, like this video, click the notification button, etc., etc. It's stuff like this that fuels me to create future videos and for free, basically. Future blog posts for free. Also, in case you're wondering, this video is inspired by a blog post that I wrote earlier on dev.to, so for more notifications of when I write blog posts or make videos, be sure to subscribe to me there. Alright, let's get started with NestJS. The first thing you need to do is install the NestJS CLI. To do so, we'll type in npm install -g at nestjs/CLI. That'll kick off the installation process and install the CLI globally on your local machine, so you can access the nest command from anywhere, any directory in your terminal. I'll be right back after this is done installing. Great, so it looks like we're done installing the NestJS CLI onto our local computer. Next thing we need to do is create a new NestJS project. I'll name mine my node project, but it goes just type in next, new, and the name or the name you want for your new node project. Press enter. This again will take some time. I'll be right back when this is done installing. If you installed the NestJS project correctly, you should see something like this in your terminal. You'll see here that they tell us to say to type in cd my node project and run the start command. Instead of running the start command, I personally like running the start dev command. That'll start up a development server instead of a non-development server. So I'm going to go ahead, open up a new tab in practice, my node project, just like that. And as I said, I like running the start dev command because that actually stands up a development server in watch mode, as you see here in the terminal. Now, in addition to starting up a development server, let's open up this project in VS Code. So I'm going to type in practice cd my node project and code dot here. I have code set up as an alias in my terminal, and here it is. Here is my node project, our NestJS project here. As you'll see, we have modules set up in our source folder. So we have app.module that uses a app service and a app controller. You'll see the app service has a getHello function that simply returns hello world, and our controller, our route, we have a get route. It handles the HTTP verb get and returns the return value of get hello, which, if we remember, is hello world. Now, we have back here started running our NestJS server. So let's go ahead, go to localhost 3000, and I'll move that into the view here. And you'll see when we make a GET request to localhost 3000, the initial route returns to us hello world. This is proof that our NestJS project is stood up, ready to go, and ready for some code. Okay, let's go back to our terminal now, and let's stop the dev server for now and install everything we need to get started with GraphQL. So I'm going to write yarn add. I need NestJS / GraphQL. I need Apollo Server Express, GraphQL Tools, and the GraphQL package. Press enter. That should all install into our project. As usual, I'm going to stop the video here, and I'll be right back. With everything installed, you should see something like this in your terminal. Let's go back to the code and see exactly how to stand up and use the GraphQL module that we just added to our project. Let's go to app.module, and it's here that we'll import the GraphQL module. So GraphQL module, and for root, I was hoping it would auto import, but it did not. So instead, here we'll import GraphQL module from @nestjs / GraphQL. Okay, for root. Now, we'll need to write some configurations in our GraphQL module. So one such configuration is the type paths. Now, this type paths tells the GraphQL module exactly where to look for the GraphQL schemas. So we'll use a type path of all GraphQL files in our schema, and that file glob looks like that. And another property we will need is resolver, validation options, and require resolvers for resolve type as false. Now what that does is avoids an error we get when GraphQL runs. It's currently a bug in the Apollo server. Hopefully it'll get fixed soon, but until it does, we need to add that GraphQL. Now, as we said in the types paths, the GraphQL module will be looking for a GraphQL to stand up. In that case, we need to write our GraphQL schema. So let's go into our source folder and add a schema.graphql file. And here's where we define the types of objects in our API. So for this demonstration, this dummy project, let's just have one type. We'll call it message. This message will have an ID, which is an integer, and a description, which is a string. And the exclamation points here means that these are required. Totally thought I could write comments like this, but apparently I cannot. But basically, debang means that the field is required. Now, we're going to describe our queries, and these are basically, think of them as GET requests from the old RESTful API days. This is what we can ask the server for. So we can ask the server for one thing and one thing only, and that is messages, which will be an array of messages. We'll also describe our mutation, and mutations are sort of, let's compare them to post requests or put requests or delete requests. In the old RESTful API days, they'll manipulate data in the server. They won't just read, they will write. So let's create a message, and when we create a message, we need a description as input, and the return value of create message is that new message. So just to go over, we have a type called message, which has an int and a description as properties. We have one query, one way to read our server, and that's to get all the messages in the server. And we have one data manipulation or one mutation, and that's to create a message. So now we've created our schema. Let's go back to our terminal. here we'll run the same yarn start dev or npm run start dev that we ran before, and this should stand up our GraphQL server. Let's go ahead and wait while we're at it. I'm going to move this over to the side. Move this over here. Okay, our everything stood up, and we're actually still getting the hello world. This is my fault. Let's go back to app.module here. You'll see that we're still providing the app service and app controller, both of which we do not want anymore because we won't be using a RESTful API. So let's delete app.controller here and app.service. And we also don't need the test file either. So there we go. We'll save. We'll go back. You'll see that since the development server is running, the server will auto restart. So let's go to our local host, this time /GraphQL, and nothing is working. Okay, now our server's running back up. Sorry for all this. And now you'll see the GraphQL playground. As you see, my computer is super duper slow. So let's just test this out. We have a query. We have our messages query, and we can run a query like this. However, you'll see that query.messages is basically null. We have not written any code for this query. We need to write what's called a resolver for the messages query. We'll do that right now. VS Code in your terminal, type nest generate module messages, press enter, and what that'll do is actually throw an error apparently. So no such something, internal main thread, binding CWD. Great. Let me actually stop the server out here. Go back and try this again. I'm hoping that's the error. It's not. Okay, so where am I? Nothing at all is working. So I'm going to restart my terminal. This did not restart it. I'm going to restart my terminal and try this one more time. So nest generate module messages, press enter, and notice that the messages module, hopefully, gets created, and you'll see that gets injected here as an import in app.module. The messages module is right here. Right now, it's totally empty, but we'll work to resolve that. Pun intended. So in messages, we're going to create messages.resolver.ts, and this is going to be our GraphQL resolver. We'll resolve that query messages that we just tried running. So first thing first, we'll import query and resolver from NestJS /GraphQL. Now, these are decorators that we can use, and writing at resolver using that decorator tells NestJS that we are about to write a resolver, and it will map directly to the resolver that we promised GraphQL we would make. So we have resolver at resolvers, and we'll have a messages array. And this messages array really should be in a database. This shouldn't be saved in memory, but for now, we'll save it in memory for demonstration purposes. The ID will be 0. The description will be the seed message, just like that. And we'll write a query. This query's name will match that that we wrote earlier in the schema.graphql. You'll see that we have a query called messages. The function name doesn't necessarily have to be messages. It could be, let's say, get messages with messages passed in as the parameter to the query decorator. Either or is fine. So we can do it like this, or like this, as long as it matches, one of those two matches the query name that we've promised in our schema.graphql. So we'll return this dot messages really should be in DB. We'll save that. And you'll notice that we wrote the resolver, but we have to tell our messages module that this resolver exists. This is one of those things in NestJS. We have to kind of inject it here in the messages module. So we'll have, oops, I forgot to, no, I did not forget to export it. Just my autocomplete isn't working very well. So we'll import messages resolver from messages.resolver, just like that. And sorry, provider of messages.resolver, and it exports messages resolver. And this exports here is necessary. That way we can use the messages resolver in our main app.module when we run the GraphQL playground. So let's go back to our terminal, start up that development server one more time, and try that messages query once again. The server is up and running. I'm going to actually give this old page a refresh, no matter how slow my computer is. I have that query all set up. Again, it's a query that runs the messages query and returns an ID. So if everything is working correctly, we'll get ID of 0, just as we wrote. And just so I can prove to you that this is the message that we created earlier in that resolver, the description is the seed message, exactly what we wrote here in messages.resolver. You can go ahead and play with it, change the description a little bit, but you'll see that messages basically returns this array here. Like for instance, we can have one with the ID of 1. We'll have it return a description of another one, just like DJ Khaled. Of course, the server has not restarted yet. Let's try it again. And you'll see that another one appears. That's the messages query, but as you remember, we also promised to create a mutation called create messages. Here we are back in VS Code, ready to write our mutation. The first thing we need to do is import a couple of decorators. We'll write the mutation decorator again. That'll tell NestJS that we are writing a mutation that we promised in schema.graphql. Here in the create messages, the create message function, we'll call the args decorator and tell it that we want the description argument from the GraphQL mutation. And basically, in Apollo, just an FYI, the NestJS GraphQL module is a wrapper around the Apollo server. So if you ever need help, go to the Apollo documents instead of the NestJS documents. You'll see that args is the arguments passed into the query or into the mutation. So we'll need to use args to rip out the parameters passed by the user here in the playground or wherever the mutation is created. So here, description will be ripped out of args, and the way to tell NestJS that we need to rip description out of args is just like this, passing the string of the name of the property that we need from args into the args decorator. Now, of course, our message needs an ID. Again, usually the database would take care of this, but we'll just make it the length of the array. So the next message here would be 2, for instance. The new message, the message object, will be something like this, It's an ID and a description. And again, description will be passed in by the caller of the mutation. So let's take the messages that really should be in DB and push the new message onto that array. And we'll return that new message because, again, in our schema.graphql, we promised that we would return a message. Perfect. Now, again, Messages Resolver is already in the message module, which is already in app module, so we're all ready to go. Hopefully the server has restarted. I believe it has. So let's refresh here. And instead of the query, let's run a mutation, create message, takes in a description. We'll call it another one. Oh, what did I do there? And we'll open this up and get the ID and the description of our new message. Let's create this message, and you'll see the message with ID number 2 is another one. So since we're using a array in memory, we can actually query for these messages here and see if another one shows up. We query, we see the seed message, we see another one, and we see another one. So basically, our functions are running exactly as we want. So again, in this series, in this video, we created a mutation. We let's see, another other one, idea 4. We created a mutation. We created a query for messages. We stood up a NestJS server, and we added GraphQL to it. That's it for now. I hope you learned a lot. If you have any questions, please tweet me on Twitter. In case you don't like the video format or any video format, I have a blog post that covers all of this. It's on dev.to/ArianJNYC. The blog post name is Stand Up a Node.js Server with NestJS. Again, follow me on Twitter, follow me on dev.to, subscribe to my YouTube channels, press the like button, press the notification button, watch my other videos, tell me how much you love me. Just all that fuels these free videos. Thanks for watching, thanks for listening.